Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Valerie Nielsen. I'm the Deputy Director of Multimodal Development at the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Palm Beach County, and we plan, prioritize, and fund transportation projects in our area. Our vision is a safe, efficient, and connected multimodal transportation system, and we're so excited today to have you here and to have our guest speaker, Paul Comfort, who's going to talk about the future of public transportation, a recent book that he published, and it's actually a #1 bestseller on Amazon. He's also the host of the world's top public transportation executive podcast, Transit Unplugged, heard in 99 countries around the world. He has a lot of history, so I will let him do the rest of the introduction, but we're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Valerie. Oh, little elbow, no little elbow. Hey guys, how's everybody doing? Great to be with you today. Thanks, Valerie, for that intro. Mayor Pinto, Chairman Pinto, good to be with you, and also Nick, the director here. Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you and speak on my favorite topic, the future of public transportation. As Valerie said, I've got a long and fruitful career in public transportation. You can go to the next slide. And I've spent 30 years in the government and public transit. There we go. And so today I'm going to talk to you about what I see as then the impact of COVID-19 on transit around the world. As Valerie mentioned, I host a podcast where I have some of the top executives from around the world. I've actually, prior to COVID, was doing this podcast live, and I visited 60 transit systems in 2 years around the world, from Sydney, Australia, to Switzerland, all over Europe and the UK, Canada and America. I think I probably visited more public transportation systems in 2018 and 19 than any other human being in the earth. I don't know anybody else who's visited that many. And got to tour their operations, meet their teams, talk to them about what they're doing. And that's what gave me the idea to actually write the book, The Future of Public Transportation, because I felt like I had my finger on the pulse of what was happening in the industry. And so I invited 40 of the world's leading transit CEOs, experts, and associations to contribute to the book. And it's changed. What's happening for the future of public transportation has morphed through the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to talk about that today. I'm also going to cover the recent American Public Transportation Association's recent survey they did at the end of 2020 of transit systems to see what are they doing right now? What is their mitigation efforts when it comes to transit? Then we're going to talk about 3 steps, what I believe are 3 steps to get transit back on track. Most places across the world, ridership dropped dramatically, but over the last few months, we've seen a dramatic uptick in ridership and interest back in public transportation. I'm going to tell you how they're doing that. And then finally, we'll talk about some things that are coming soon. Something popped up on this screen. There we go. All right. So let's talk about what COVID did to public transit. So we all know this probably, but let's rehash the story. Public transit was having an amazing comeback in 2018 and 19, really led by Tom Lambert, the CEO of Houston Metro, who rebooted his entire transit system back in like 2015, something like that. I visited him with a team that came with me from my transit agency. I was CEO of MTA in Maryland, the Maryland Transit Administration. We ran the Baltimore City bus, light rail, subway system, and commuter bus and commuter train into Washington, D.C., and Annapolis, and paratransit. And we wanted to follow his lead down there. So we brought a team down and we rebooted the entire network, and so did a lot of other cities, from Seattle, to all these cities in between. And as a result of that, in 2018, we saw 7 cities in America see an uptick in ridership, led by cities like Las Vegas, Seattle, a few others. And then in 2019, the overall transit industry, for the first time in a decade, saw an increase in ridership. We were thrilled with that. Cities like Washington and New York City were seeing increases. And then, bam, the gut punch, right? March 2020, the 15 days to slow the spread, which has now been almost exactly 1 year and 15 days to slow the spread of COVID. And ridership, because the elected officials told everybody, stay home, don't go to work anymore, work from your house if you can. Only essential workers should ride transit. And so a 50 to 95% reduction in ridership, the highest amount, which was in commuter bus and commuter train. So for instance, I ran a service called MARC Commuter Train Service. We had lines contracted out to Amtrak and Bombardier, but they ran in tens of thousands of people every day into Washington, D.C. Union Station. The ridership on those trains went down 95%, just like they did at Long Island Railroad, BART, et cetera, right? And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in a minute, what I think is going to happen with commuter trains. So they were dramatically reduced, and public bus generally went down about 50%, which is interesting, right? Because they said only essential workers should ride public transit, and yet still it bottomed out around 50% in most cities, which means what? Right? By the process of deduction, we can analyze that half the people riding transit are essential workers. And so, I wrote a children's book this year on public transportation. So I can say this uh, with authority. The wheels in the bus that go round and round are also the wheels on our economy that turn the economy. And the people that are making our economy turn every day are the ones that rely on public transit to get to work, right? They're the pharmacy techs. They're all the people that are actually running this economy. A lot of them are taking public transit. And so transit systems reduced their routes to meet the demand, right? They ramped up cleaning services. They put in place capacity limits so you could have some social distancing. And of course, most of them required masks, and now the Biden administration has made that nationwide. We did see some funding come out of Washington as a result of the pandemic, which was great. I've been concerned for a long time that the federal government saw their role only primarily in capital and not with operating dollars. And so we're seeing now, first the CARES Act in March, right? $25 billion into formula funds. And then the CRISA Act in December of 2020, $14 billion, largely for the largest systems in the country. And then now, most recently out of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Package, $30.5 billion, the largest single tranche of federal funds for operating dollars for transit systems in the history of America. And so, what will the future hold? Now we know that's what happened. Now, what will the future hold for transit, do we think, out of COVID-19? I wrote an article for Metro Magazine last year, and I think all of these items, which I came up with, which I call the 5 long-term implications on transit, are still true. Number one, I see what's called the death of the fare box. People were already working toward, like Robbie Mackinnon in Kansas City wanted to go fare free. He's done that now. A lot of transit systems went fare free during the peak of the pandemic, and now they've gone back and are charging fares. But I'm not just talking about fare free transit. I'm talking about going toward that low touch solution where you don't need cash anymore. Now, there are some federal regulations requiring to make sure we can serve the unbanked, but transit systems are figuring out ways through rechargeable cards, et cetera. And I think that as one transit leader told me even prior to COVID, that the next batch of fare boxes that people buy will be their last. Now, a lot of agencies are saying they're not even going to buy another batch. They're going to go toward validators, paying with your phone or a tap and go card, like Clinton is moving to right here in Palm Beach, where they're going to go and have a Paradise card. He told me about it yesterday. Clinton Forbes, the executive director of Palm Tran, and I'm very excited for him moving toward that because that is the future of public transportation. When we do that, then we can move to all-door boarding. One of the biggest issues in public transit, and it was validated by the Visa credit card company when they did a survey in 2019 that they shared with me as part of my book, The Future of Public Transportation, is that one of the biggest concerns people had about riding public transit is that the speed of the system is so slow in the central business districts in our cities. And that's because you have a line of people that want to come in the front door and they have to pay their fare. And it takes a long time. Sometimes, like in Baltimore, we're allowing people to purchase day passes, which take time, 30 seconds on average in Baltimore it took us. John Duncan, my COO, figured that out. And so we figured out there was 56,000 wasted hours of productivity just by allowing people to buy a day pass at the fare box because it took 30 seconds per transaction. Those are the kind of things that slowed it down. Moving to zero fare or validator fare at the front and back door will pick up the speed 1 or 2 points probably. And that, it means a lot. You can move from 7 miles per hour to maybe 9 miles per hour. It's a big improvement over a day. But I think we're still going to see a slow recovery for commuter services. I know here in Florida, you've got the Tri-Rail line. I actually raced it up here, coming up 95, or it was going about the speed of my car, about 70. It felt like when I was driving by it. But commuter services all over the country are taking a long time to recover. And that's because people have made a change in how they're going to work. USA Today had a survey last month that I read where they surveyed what traditional professional white-collar workers, and they said that fully 1/3 of them said that if I'm required to go back into the office every day, I'm going to quit my job and find a job where I can work some from home, this hybrid approach. So I don't think that offices are dead, anything like that. But I do think that a lot of professional workers that work in those tall office buildings in downtown cities are now going to figure out a way to work at home at least a couple days a week. And so commuter services are going to have to figure out what's their new model, because they can't rely on the increasing ridership every year, probably for the next 5 years, I imagine. So I've been talking with CEOs of commuter services from Sydney, Australia to Toronto and cities all in between. A lot of them are looking at doing things like increasing their midday service, or increasing nights and weekends. People can come into town, nightlife and ball games. They get that last mile solution like Mayor Pinto and I were talking about. And it's a last mile plus, like he was saying, where you can ride from the front door of your house to the train station, to your hub, then get on and ride into the city, and then go to your ball game, go out and have dinner with your friends, and then come back on the train, take that last mile solution home, and you never have to get behind the wheel of your own car. That's really what transit agencies across the world are talking about doing now as part of their commuter services. And then I think increased federal funding could be the new norm. It looks like in the new Reauthorization Act on Capitol Hill. I wear another hat in addition to some of the roles that Valerie talked about. I'm also executive director of the North American Transit Alliance, which represents the nation's 6 largest contractors that run paratransit and fixed route services, companies like First Transit and MV that run services right here in Palm Beach for you all. And so we work with lobbyists on Capitol Hill, et cetera, and it looks like that there is a new realization on Capitol Hill that transit is required to make the economy actually function. And so I think we're going to see an increase in funding. I already talked to you about some of that, but even in the regular funding, not these emergency programs, that we're going to see an increase in federal funding, which is great. And then I think the cleaning protocols will continue to stay in place. And they're going to do even what I'm calling the theater of the clean, right? I was with somebody this week that talked about that, so that you've got people, I think Clinton said they're doing it. You've got cleaners, which was verboten prior to this. You never have your utility personnel on the bus at the same time there's passengers on. But now they're doing that to show the passengers right in front of them, right? I'm cleaning the stanchions. We're cleaning the high-touch areas. Just like it makes you feel comfortable when you go into a bathroom, or like at the hotel I'm staying at, in the elevator. There's a sign that says, this elevator was cleaned at 1 p.m. This elevator was cleaned at 3 p.m. So it was just wiped down. That's the kind of thing that we're seeing now in transit systems, and people are saying that's good. Now I feel a little more comfortable about getting on the bus or train. Here's the APTA survey data I was talking about. The American Public Transportation Association represents most of the large transit systems in America, and they asked all of their members, what are your 3 key performance indicators now? What are your top KPIs? And look, there was a reversal, because prior to this, you know what it's been, right? It's always been ridership. And thankfully, that's not number 1 anymore. I've never felt like that should be our number 1 key performance indicator, because it's not something we can actually control. Ridership is a function of 100 different things, from the price of fuel to where somebody works and the changing demographics, et cetera, in the community. So now customer satisfaction is number 1. They realize that, the old adage, if you build it, they will come. So they realize that we have to make public transit something that people want to ride, something that they're interested in meeting their needs and making it useful for them. So customer satisfaction is 1. That will lead to increased ridership. And of course, access to mobility options is number 3, right? People want to have lots of different options. Mayor Pinto and I were talking about that. As the future of public transportation really does involve not just a transit agency running the traditional bus routes, but it's also all the additional services. On Friday, I was up in Jacksonville with Nat Ford, who is, was the chairman of APTA back when I was CEO of MTA, and really helped lead our industry. A Floridian, helped lead the whole American industry into the new mobility, which is encompassing not just the public provided transit, but also the private providers that have come into cities. Private providers, including companies like Brightline, which I'm super excited about. Just got to go over and see their train station here just a block down. Can't wait to ride that once they're back fully in service. But companies like, Via, and companies that are doing Microtransit, or even the Ubers and Lyfts and the electric bikes and scooters and all the mobility options in a city, pulling together to create one ecosystem of mobility. That is access to mobility options. And Nat led us to that and is actually demonstrating it right now there at his operation. And it is amazing. So what are transit agencies doing in response to COVID? I'll just run through this quickly because Hopefully, we're headed out of this as the vaccinations continue, but they've moved to contactless payment solutions. They've moved to on-demand applications, common payment platforms, and mobility as a service applications. We'll talk in more detail about that in just a moment. And then, of course, physical distancing. Um, Steve Sawyer, who's my boss and general manager of Trapeze, says that one of the great lessons of 2020 is that by using technology more effectively, transit agencies can improve the rider experience and in turn inspire them to get back on the bus. And that's what we're talking about today. I think there was a misconception early on when COVID hit that this was going to be, a long-lasting thing. The people were not going to get back on the transit. The transit systems were dead in the water. As the New York Times said, there might be a death spiral of transit, right, where you have less riders and then you have less revenue coming in, which leads to less service, and you start spinning down. That's not what's happened at all. Instead, what's happened is that bright people, the CEOs like we talked about today, Clinton Forbes and others, and here in Florida, you've got Brad over in Clearwater and others, they have taken this opportunity to remake what they're doing and create a mobility options that people want right now. And they're using technology to do it. So here's what I believe we need to do to reboot transit, to get people comfortable, to get back on the bus. It's not just a theory. I'm an inductive thinker. I wade in data and information all day long. It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. I'm thinking about transit and how we can continue to promote it here in the United States and around the world. And here's what is happening. This isn't just theory. This is what's happening. We are rebooting transit. We're moving to high-tech and low-touch solutions, and we're moving toward green and clean. And that's my comfort prescription for how we can get transit back on track. What do I mean by that? Let's unpack this a little bit. On the reboot side, what systems are doing now is they're reanalyzing the demand. Where is the demand right now? We talked about this, an example of it, when we talked about commuter services, right? So you may not have the high AM and the high PM peaks anymore like you used to, and then nothing in between. Instead, they're reanalyzing the demand and saying maybe we need to expand our market to more than just the 9 to 5 commuters, and that is happening. Just read an article in the New York Times last week about that New York MTA and other cities are looking to do just that, and they are doing that. They're now offering additional services. A buddy of mine who was on our Transit Unplugged podcast from Transport for London told me 3 months ago that they were moving toward that, to maybe offering more bus service in the suburbs and not so much in downtown London, because so many people are working from their home now that they might need bus service more toward the cleaners or out to a lunch restaurant in their suburban community. And they're not going to be going downtown all the time. And so then transit agencies are recalibrating their service offerings. My friend Lauren Skyver, she used to be at MTA in Baltimore where I was, and then headed Delaware's transit system, and now runs Sunline Transit in Coachella Valley. And she is our nation's really preeminent leader on hydrogen-fueled buses and built her own hydrogen plant that I got to tour right before it went online. But she says, Paul, we have to stop selling what people aren't buying. And that is the truth for transit. And so transit agencies now have realized that traditional route structured service may not be the end all be all. And we need to recalibrate our service offerings. Where will that lead us? I believe where it's leading right now is the introduction of microtransit and also mobility as a service. Let's talk about what that means. So mobility as a service is a concept that was started really in Helsinki, Finland in the last decade. And basically what it said is that you take all of these mobility options that I mentioned earlier that's in a city, both the public and private sector, and you put them all together on one smartphone app. And then people can plan and pay for their trip. And it can be that last mile plus solution that Mayor Pinto was talking about, where you decide, I want to get there fast or I want to get there cheap or low cost, right? So the lowest cost option might be to walk from your house 3 blocks down and get on the bus, which will take you someplace downtown. Then you get off and ride a scooter the rest of the way. Whereas the fastest way might be get an Uber. That'll take you down to the train station. Then you can ride that in. So there's multiple options. It's trip planning. It was an app called the WIM app, and it's still running. And that's what mobility as a service is. Transit is always, though, mass transit is the backbone of mass mobility as a service. So you need that in the middle. So I'll give you an example, 2 examples actually, right? Some transit agencies who have dipped their toe in the water and are doing this are cities like Dallas, Texas, DART, where my friend David Leininger, who was CFO at the time when they developed the 3rd version of their app and now is acting CEO there, have done a tremendous job of pulling together 10 different mobility options in their city. Dallas is big with light rail, but they've got everything there. And you can use and pay for all of them with a single click, right? You push a button after you plan your trip out, and then everything is paid for, and you don't need to pull out your wallet along the way. Then you go to Denver, and they've tried a different approach. They have allowed Uber to take some of the lead in putting transit on their app. But however you want to do this, mass transit, the transit agency, is still in the middle. Why is mobility as a service taking off? Well, I'd say that there are three at least reasons. It's responding to what the current reality is. Technology is now available, right? We all run our lives by our cell phones, and we have GPS location. There's generally ubiquitous access to the internet in most cities, at least. And software is now running the world, especially artificial intelligence. So, and then you have a myriad of mobility options, not just cars and transit systems, but all the things we just talked about, right? The bikes, the scooters, the private companies that are running um, microtransit services, as well as public agencies, and then changing consumer expectations, right? I was in the hotel last night and I called a restaurant to see if they would deliver food, pizza. It's one of these supposedly the best pizza place in the county. They advertise. And they said, sorry, we don't do delivery. You'll have to call DoorDash or Uber Eats, right? So that's the changing consumer expectation. There are now private companies that are doing this stuff, and people expect their mobility of their persons, not just their food and their groceries and everything else that's been delivered and their Amazon package. They're expecting it to be convenient and contextual. What do I mean by contextual? Have you ever noticed that when you search for something on Google, within an hour or two, you're seeing Facebook ads for it, it seems like, or Instagram ads? That's contextual. It's understanding what people want now based on their digital footprint and providing that option to them. So for example, in New York City now, they're looking at people who only want to go into the office on the commuter trains 2 days a week. Well, instead of only selling 30-day monthly passes, they're now saying we're going to sell a pass that's good for 2 days a week for people who want to ride in. That'd be in and back 4 times, right? Plus you may get your, they have this guaranteed ride home that we used to run at Mark Train. A lot of them do that as well. So you contextualize your offer based on the current need. That's how transit agencies are adapting to the current reality. And then consumers want a flexible model. They want to pay now or they want a potential subscription. So as our generation's Edison, Elon Musk said, I think it's important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. The normal way we conduct our lives is reason by analogy. The reason I say that is I spent a lot of time in local government in my career, like Mayor Pinto. I was a county administrator for 2 counties and then elected county commissioner, and worked as a transit CEO for 7 years right out of college of a small system in my home county. Worked for the county commissioners like Clinton does, and I can tell you that government runs by stories, anecdotes, analogy. Example. I'm sitting there at the county commissioners meeting as county administrator, and one of the commissioners comes in and might say, Comfort! I hear the trash pickup was late on Tuesday. My neighbor said it was 15 minutes late. What's wrong with this government? Why can't we make the ship run on time? So that's how government is run. So then that becomes the top priority, and instead of using data to drive decisions, which is really what we need to do and what public transit leaders need to help inform the elected officials. And I can say one as a recovering one, that we need to focus on data. And, then I can show them with my Viewpoint software on my tablet, Commissioner, I'm sorry the trash ran late on Tuesday for your neighbor, but you can see we're 97% on time. That's 5% above the national average. I'll look into that specific example you gave me, but I can tell you, because of the GPS satellites are telling us, tracking it, it's not just opinion, it's fact. We are running a system on time. That's the kind of data that now when you have all the information at our fingertips, we don't have to run on stories and analogies. We can look for first principles, right? Like our book Stephen Covey wrote, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He wrote, start with the end in mind. What do riders want? The end in mind. They want safety, convenience, reliability, and affordability. The convenience side points us right toward mobility as a service. It's customer focused. It does all the work in the background. You can plan and pay for your trip. So that's what the customer wants. What does the city government want or the county government? Normally, they want lower congestion. They want equity, which is a hot topic right now. They want accessible service. They want greener transit, not the diesel belching buses, as they say. And then they want optimized public transportation. In summary, mass meets the customer's needs and the agency and city's goals. This is something I'm very excited about seeing in the near future. I've been talking about this for 3.5 years in my role here as Senior Vice President of Trapeze Group, which is mobility as a service, right? It's kind of like the Netflix of transportation. You know how you rent a service, a streaming service, and it gives you all the shows you might want to watch. It's contextualized to what you've watched last. Well, that's what mobility as a service is. It's the Netflix of mobility. And the next step is a subscription. Just like you subscribe to Netflix, you will be able to subscribe, I think, here in America this decade. We're not there yet. Helsinki, Finland, and other cities in Europe are, where you could, for instance, you could sign up for a gold pass. Like, you probably can't see this on the screen, but on the right-hand side. So let's say it's $500 a month. It'll give you unlimited transit ridership, maybe 30 rides on a taxi cab, up to 10 miles. 5 times during the month, you could rent a Zip rental car for up to 24 hours. And you would have all these options so that, you know what? Families won't need 2 cars anymore. You can get away with 1 car or maybe no cars if you're planning to live 90% of your life within the county or city limits. That is what's coming. As Joshua Shank told me on my podcast, Transit Unplugged, he's the Chief Innovation Officer of LA Metro. We came together to form a public-private partnership, and we were able to provide what will eventually be the largest on-demand, publicly provided microtransit service in the country. So they're putting 200 vehicles on the road, and microtransit basically is like Uber Pool. It's the simplest way to help you analogize it. It basically is, I push a button on my phone, and a vehicle will come to either where I'm at, or the app will tell me, based on it'll triangulate my location and say, go stand on the curb 1 block down from your house, and a vehicle will be by to pick you up in 6 minutes. There'll be 3 other people on board, so you need to wear a mask for now. But this personalized service is helping to fill the gaps. As transit agencies have figured out that we're not going to bring back all the same routes. A lot of them have already changed their routes based on what I've talked about, the changing demand. But there are people that sort of need to be grandfathered in that still need that transit service. Maybe it doesn't meet the requirements that we're requiring, 10 passengers per hour need to ride this route, or it doesn't make sense for us to run it, or 50, or whatever your number is. But there are still some people that need service there. So we will give them a microtransit option, but we won't run the 40-foot bus on there. That's what's happening next. And finally, green and clean. Zero-emission buses, they are all the rage now. I had dinner the other night down here in Florida with the senior vice president of Proterra Bus, which is one of the big 3 electric bus manufacturers. He was telling me all about the amazing advances in bus batteries. People are concerned about how long these buses can last on the road with 1 charge. I'm telling you, based on the latest battery packs, you can run them now pretty much all day. Even with your heat on in the winter. Down here, that's not a big issue, I know. But let's say with the air conditioner on. And so battery electric, CNG, hydrogen are the 3 main zero-emission fuels. And they are it's a policy goal of many governments when it comes to climate change and all that stuff. They want to make sure that they're not contributing to it with their vehicles, their public transit vehicles. Massive social distancing, hopefully that'll only be short-term. But I think surface treatments and ventilation and air sanitation will be long-term implications when it comes to what we're doing. Transit agencies right now are also adding in occupancy in their GTFS real-time data feeds, which means if you have an app which says, here comes the bus, you see it just like an Uber car, now it'll tell you the bus is full at that bus stop. So that helps you make some determinations. I like it better when it gives you the historical connotation, because so what if it's full at the previous bus stop? 6 people might get off at my bus stop, and then I can get on, and I didn't go because I thought it was full. Well, other apps now are offering the additional option of, for the last 3 days, it's been red, the stop before you, the stop, and that stop. They're doing this all over the country. MBTA is Joshua Gerstel, one of the guys, or David Gerstel I talked to up there, their chief digital officer. They're one of the first ones to get this done. Cloud-based machine learning analytics. I could spend a half hour talking about that. I'll spend half a minute. This is the trend. So let me give you an example. My company, Trapeze, has this stuff where we can put it on a bus, and it does all these analytics, and it machine learns. A lot of other companies have it too. And what it could do, so there were some buses coming out from California across the country, and it had this turned on. And before they got here, because they were driving it, a signal went on and said, based on the machine learning that we have learned from operating on these type of vehicles for the last X amount of months, we can tell you that this bus here has reached a certain temperature threshold in its core. It's going to have some issues if you keep driving it for another 30 minutes. So pull over. The last thing you want is a breakdown, and let it cool down and do whatever you got to do. So that kind of machine learning where it's telling over software, it can tell the maintenance department that bus will break down in 20 minutes. Because I can tell you the biggest thing that screw up in your day when you're a transit system manager is having a breakdown with customers on it. It's awful. Transferring people on the side of the road, it's unsafe and all that stuff. And it makes people, very unsure about transit. You do not want to have a breakdown with passengers on board. So this kind of machine learning and analytics, that's just the cusp of what that stuff is doing now. Very exciting. This company I'm with, Trapeze, is analyzing all of this and integrating it into all our software packages, or a lot of them. And it's phenomenal, the things that we're going to be able to do in just a short amount of time. And then transit agencies are also looking at improving their data management platforms to support these flexible, dynamic operations we're talking about. Final slide. How long have I been talking? All right, good. I'll give you the big finish here. So I don't know anywhere else we can see this. Well, one reason because it's a picture of me, but I don't know where else you can see these 7 things, because these are ideas that I've just pulled out of the thin air over the last month as I've been thinking about this. Not the thin air, but what's really happening. And I put this picture up because it's a great example. So here I was, the CEO of the MTA, announcing something very awesome at the time, probably 4 years ago. And that was brand new express service from Annapolis to Baltimore City. And the mayor of Annapolis was standing right next to me, a buddy of mine. And we were all excited about this brand new service that was going to help people, commute into work in the morning on express service. It would be quick. You jump between cities really quickly. And now, you know what? It's defunct. The latest and greatest things can turn on a dime, which is why we need to know what's coming just over the horizon. Investment in transit will continue to increase, is my prediction, as I already mentioned. Mobility as a service and microtransit that we've delved into quite deeply today is coming, is happening right now. More and more cities are looking to it. Private companies like National Express and others, which Matt Wood is a COO, lives right in Miami. They now are like, they have their own branded service of microtransit that they can bring into a city. You don't even have to ramp it up yourself. You just hire a private contractor who does this all over the country, and you can pilot with them and see how it goes in your area. So microtransit is happening now. It is the hottest trend right now in transit. Improved apps, like we've talked about. Everybody needs an app now. If you don't have an app for your transit system, you're really behind the times. You've got to get an app, and not just for your fixed route, but for your paratransit too, so that people can book a trip on their phone. These are people with disabilities, or as my friend Robbie Mackin likes to call them, diverse abilities. They can book a trip on their phone or on the web, and they don't have to actually call in and talk to a reservationist. That, of course, helps the transit agency because they don't have to have as many reservationists stuffed into a room. Some places now have figured out ways to socially distance them. I think you guys have done that here in Palm Beach. I think that's what they were telling me yesterday. And so improved apps, though, are all the rage, right? Seeing where your vehicle is right now, predicting when it's going to come, and even doing more things. Here's what I think we need to do. This hasn't been done much in the U.S. We need to do more gamification. We need to do more loyalty programs. Just like, I'm a guy that uses Marriott hotels. Why do I use Marriott hotels? Well, they are a Maryland-based company, one of the last Fortune 500 companies we have, and that's where I'm from. But also because I love Marriott hotels because they give me lots of points. And every time I stay there, it gives me points for my next family vacation or whatever I want to do, right? And so it's gamified. Though that's a loyalty program. Then the gamification comes in where you can rate your ride when you get off the bus. And if you rate it 5 times in a month, you get a discount on your ride. And all these kind of fun things that people like to do now. We haven't really grabbed hold of that. Public transit agencies are not that quick to grab on to the latest, greatest innovations that the private sector's done, but this is something we need to do, especially to help people get back on the bus. Make it fun for them, where when you're going by the McDonald's or the Burger King, when you're driving right by on your phone, it pops up and says 20% discount if you get off at this stop and go to that Burger King. You can get this stuff paid for by the private sector if you have a little innovation there. There's another big one. Walkable, pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly city centers are all the rage coming out of COVID. You probably saw that 11 major cities in the U.S., probably even more than that, but 11 of the major cities went car-free in their city centers during the peak of the pandemic. And a lot of them have decided we're going to keep it. It's awesome. People love it. They love having a walkable area where they don't have to worry about getting run down by somebody. And so this land use decisions really impact the ability of people to have the mobility that they want and need. And it comes to even things like scooters. Like I've been in some cities when you felt like you were going to get run down by a scooter. It's going by me at 15 miles per hour or something, and I'm walking and I have to jump out of the way. And so you got to have good controls in place. And then you need to have also great land use policies that allow for people's mobility, because I got to be honest with you, in my mind, and Houston proved this after the hurricane they had, mobility is life. Transit equals mobility. Mobility equals life. If you can't move around, you don't have much of a life. So what we're offering people is not just the traditional transit, get on the fixed route bus. We're talking about a whole cornucopia of mobility options, and that's what the future of public transportation is. And it includes these walkable, pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly cities. Autonomous vehicles, as I mentioned, Nat Ford, I was just with him. He's one of the leaders in this. I went to their test and learn facility. Phenomenal. If you don't follow me on LinkedIn, you should. I put up something every day on LinkedIn about public transportation, the latest and greatest things happening, and did a lot of posts from that visit there. Autonomous vehicles aren't the end all be all do all, but in many cities, they are now taking a role, a niche role, campus transportation, et cetera, 24-hour type, moving people from parking lots across in the hot Florida sun across to a building, and maybe solutions also in smaller areas where you can't get the big buses. High-speed rail, particularly private high-speed rail. That is what's happening. I mean, I just had David Kim, the Secretary of Transportation for California, my podcast last week, and he was talking about the state entity that's putting in, the high-speed rail there. But there are so many options, like we've talked about, Brightline, that are really just moving ahead, right? And then finally, I think it's becoming more science and less fiction. Hyperloop and vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. I've got a great picture at the end of my children's book on public transportation that my artist Sudeep KP put in there. It was just a perfect picture of one of these helicopter-looking vehicles without a driver. I'm telling you, within this decade, Mayor Pinto, they're going to be landing in our front yard, picking us up and taking us to downtown Palm Beach and dropping us on top of a building. Maybe not for $99, but we'll see. But it's happening. And so this is what's coming soon, right around the corner. In closing, I'm done. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Hey, if you want more information about this, that's what I do. I'm a transit evangelist. My company, Trapeze, allows me to do this basically full-time. They're big enough where they don't need to see a ton of ROI on me. So we've got a website. I've got a website, The Future Public Transportation, where I'm constantly putting things. Listen to my podcast, Transit Unplugged, every Wednesday. If it's Wednesday, it's Meet the Press. No, it is Transit Unplugged if it's Wednesday, right? And so every week we have a new, actually, I'm going to be interviewing Valerie right after this to be a guest on one of our podcasts. And then I have a blog on Trapeze that you can, and it's not just me, it's tons of other people that write for them. And if I can help you in any way, if you're watching today and you'd like me to give a similar presentation to your college or university, your transit agency, let me know. No charge, happy to do it. And then you can follow me there on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, which are my professional social media podcasts, social media sites that I do. And then, of course, I've got my 2 books. And after this, I'll be doing a book signing, giving away free books to everybody in the room if you want them. My children's book and my book on future public transportation. Thank you so much, Valerie, for the opportunity to come here and Nick and Mayor Pinto to speak about the future public transportation. I hope I can have a continuing role to help you promote mobility here in the Palm Beach area. It's an exciting place to be. Thank you. All right. So what are we doing now, Valerie? Q&A?
Paul, thank you so much. That was a really great presentation. I'm energized. I'm inspired now. I want to ride transit. I'm excited for the future. Now we are going to open it up for a discussion Q&A for those folks in the room. And then for those online, if you'd like to raise your hand, we'll read Alyssa Frank, who's here with us. She will read your name, and then you can ask a question if you have any questions for Paul, for the group. And yeah, just an opportunity to I guess to pick your brain on transit.
Don't ask me who's going to win the March Madness. That's what I'm not. But anything related to transit or mobility.
So we do have our first question. Oh, sorry. Our first question is from our executive director, Nick Urin.
Hey. What is it, Nick?
Paul, thank you so much for being here today. This was wonderful. A very informative discussion, very informative presentation. So I guess as I'm listening to your presentation, it struck me that you paid a lot of attention to mobility as a service. Our agency at the TPA works in partnership with our transit providers, with Palm Tran, with Tri-Rail, and even in some respects with Brightline, to fund capital projects. So I think the question for me is we're trying to determine what to collaboratively plan for, prioritize, and fund. Should we be placing more emphasis on technology investments that harness and take advantage of private sector mobility as service opportunities or options in the marketplace? Or should we be investing in major capital projects that allow for a publicly operated transit service to function as the backbone of a network of transportation options?
Great question. Thank you. So it's a similar question, I think, between in paratransit. I used to run Washington, D.C., WMATA's paratransit system for 5 years, director of operations. And I would tell people there's a tug of war in between on-time performance and productivity. Productivity is passengers per hour, and on-time performance is what it sounds like. How, does the bus get to your house on time? So the more passengers you put on a shared vehicle, the lower your on-time performance, right? Because it takes more time to load people, et cetera. Versus if you only have one passenger per hour, you can pull the other way and have 95% on-time performance. And then there's a balance in between. Carl Parr, who was my paratransit director at MTA, was able to find the right balance where with 8 to 10,000 passenger trips a day, we're the fourth largest paratransit system in America, we were at 96% on-time performance, and we still had 1.2, 1.3 trips per hour. So when it comes to infrastructure versus let's call it new mobility options, all the kind of things we're talking about, I think there needs to be a balance. As I said in the presentation, at the center of mass is always mass transit. I think that you have to have those, they are, let's say, if you're going to analogize it to a house, they are, the main corner pillars and the foundation of your system. But then you have to have things that connect them all. And so I think that creating investments in other mobility options. And to be honest with you, a lot of it's being done in the private sector. So it may not have to involve a ton of public money. It just involves the public transit agency and the planning agency tying it all together with, you do an NDA, then you do a mutual services agreement where you help each other. Let's use an example of our buddy Brad over in Pinellas County, where early on, he was one of the first people to say, hey, with Lyft, I'm going to give you a subsidy if you take a Lyft car to one of our transit hubs. And so he was pulling in the private provider, which he didn't then have to pay for, except for a small subsidy. And he was investing in the shared mobility of his community, putting more people into the backbone system of his mass transit. So I think there's ways, creative ways to do both of them. To be honest, I hate to be a politician, an economist. What did Eisenhower say? He never met a one-handed economist, right? On the one hand, but on the other hand. So, but I really think that's the answer on this one. What else?
So I don't have any other questions online right now. I don't know if we have any other questions in the room.
Mayor Pinto, you got anything else?
Since I had the pleasure of meeting with you and talking with you and having lunch with you, I got a lot of good information from you. I'm intrigued by the MAAS model. It is a path, I think, to harness collective technologies to converge. But it also talks about a perspective on how we should look at public transportation going forward. I think it changes the model to say that it's not about providing transportation, you just use an example of efficiency, but providing solutions that the time is whatever the user's time is. It's not the provider's time. It's whenever I, the traveler, whatever my schedule is, that's what takes precedence, and the solutions through that model will tend to provide those kinds of services because you're looking at it as a service.
Thank you. I think that's dead on accurate. Basically, it goes back to that slide that we were looking at earlier, where we asked, or APTA asked agencies, what are your top 3 key performance indicators now? And what they basically said is, we want to put the customer first and the customer's needs, not our pre-planned objectives. And so I'm with you on that. That is really where transit, if we want to get people back on the bus, we need to start putting our customer, and not that we weren't before, but even more so, right? As we reboot our systems, like I'm going to go through the whole slideshow and go right past it. Now, here it goes. As we reboot our systems, we need to put customer satisfaction, put the customer at the center of everything we do. I mean, it just stands to reason, right? So I'm very excited, by the way, as we talked over lunch about your vision for public mobility here in the Palm Beach area, and I hope you can fulfill it and achieve it, because it really does serve all the demographics of an area, right? So just like a school system, like you were mentioning to me, right? Having a strong public education system serves the whole community. So, I'm in my 50s now, and my wife and I have raised our children. I've only got one child left in school, but you know what? Having an educated young people benefits me in the long run, right? And so even though I may have all my kids out of the school system, it still makes sense to me to fund the school system so that I can continue to have educated children rise up and take their place in our economy. The same thing is happening with mobility. Public transit, even if you don't ride it, it is helping you. One thing it's doing is reducing congestion. One of the key, I did an article recently or a talk or something about let's get back to basics, like Elon Musk said in that article. What are the primary principles? Why are we running public transit? I mean, one of the key reasons that some people have forgotten about is to reduce congestion. Now, traffic is back up in major cities across the world. UITP is tracking the travel data on transit, which is the International Transit Union. And then I'm seeing also the traffic and vehicle cars, and they've gone right back up 95% in a lot of cities where they're right back where they were pre-pandemic on traffic. Ridership on transit hasn't, unfortunately, because of some uninformed statements early on, which told people, you know, unclean, transit is unclean. It's a petri dish for germs. Well, we were talking about over lunch. All the latest studies have not shown that's the case at all. Public transit is just as safe, if not safer, than a lot of other places because of all the cleaning being done, the air purification, everybody's wearing their mask on board. It is a very, it's no, you know, no more dangerous probably than going to a Walmart, right? So what's happening now is that people are realizing that an investment in mobility and public transportation is good for me no matter what. It reduces congestions on the road. It helps clean the environment by getting cars off the road and going to zero emission vehicles. We're now reducing particulates in the atmosphere. There's so many policy reasons to support public mobility, even beyond the one, which is that a good, strong public transit system, it really is a fundamental for a strong economy because it does create economic development in your community. And that's why businesses are so supportive of it. When I was in Baltimore, I was working with Under Armour and other companies up there. They were creating a whole new mini city outside of the city. And I worked with Amazon, the same thing. They understood the value of having public mobility in their campuses. And so, you know, we pre-planned out where the bus stops would be, and we made sure they were cement reinforced. So when the bus stops there, it doesn't put grooves down on the road. All these kind of pre-planning aspects because they were integrating public transit right into their infrastructure, just like they would electric wires or you know, the pipes underground that bring in the water and the sewer and all that. That mobility really has that kind of role now in most smart cities. And we didn't even talk about smart cities, but public mobility really is an integral part of creating a smart city infrastructure so that you've got transit signal priority that's tuned into your buses so that the light will stay green longer or turn green faster when a bus is coming so that the speed of that vehicle can improve, or having bus-only lanes, which could eventually lead to BRT systems and all the other options that many cities are looking to right now. So I'm very excited about your plans. I think that's how we started. And I think you've got a great vision, and this organization is lucky to have someone like you as an elected official who understands the value of investment. And, you know, let me just switch over to that topic, investment. We talked about the importance of federal investment, but I can't overemphasize the importance of local investment. So transit systems from Austin, Texas, you know, to Richmond, Virginia, and all across the country. I think APTA figured out that it was really high, like 80 to 90% of all of the referendums on the ballots over the last year or two, where people were actually voting to increase their own taxes to fund public transit. They passed. People get it. They understand that really public mobility is a requirement for your city to function effectively. And so there needs to be an investment in that. Just like there's an investment in parks to keep your city great, like your city has all these parks you were mentioning to me, or in your school system, right? We also need that other leg of the stool, which is public mobility. And it requires an investment, a dedicated investment. In Washington, D.C., at WMATA, where I used to work, and my friend Paul Wiedefeld, I was a contractor, but Paul's the CEO. He doesn't have a dedicated funding source. So every year he has to go back to the federal government, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. And, you know, I don't want to call it a begathon, but he's requesting funds every year from them. So they spend a lot of time just focused on getting that annual appropriation, when really most transit agencies now and cities that are forward thinking are putting in place dedicated funding that can be there. You take it to the voters, you let them vote on it, and then that funding is there. And then you can plan for those infrastructure projects that Nick mentioned, where you can know we're going to have the funds that come in for the next 7 years, because it takes a long time to build a light rail system or a BRT system. And so you've got dedicated funding that you can make that happen. And then as an elected official, you can smile and know that, hey, I know that in 7 years, I'm going to be cutting a ribbon. Even if I'm not there, I'll be emeritus. Even if I'm not elected, I'll be able to be in the background seeing this vision take place. So I'm super pumped about your plans here for mobility in this very important part of Florida and in our nation. So hopefully some of the information we shared about where you fit into the wide spectrum of what's happening globally will be a benefit. Thank you. Anything else? Okay.
I have two more right now. First, we're going to go with Clinton Forbes.
Buddy.
Can you hear me?
I didn't even know that was you when you walked in, Clinton. You had your mask on. I didn't recognize you. This is Clinton Forbes, the great Clinton Forbes, the classiest dresser. Clinton is the CEO of Palm Tran, and he's been affectionately known as the classiest dresser in the transit industry.
My dress down day today.
Yeah, today's your dress down day. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, Paul, thank you for visiting us, and thank you for your talk. You're one of the better talkers in the industry, and what you're doing is critically important for our industry here in Palm Beach County and nationwide. It's about sharing and evangelizing this very important topic of transit, and there's no better time than now to make sure that we continue to advocate for public transportation and its future. So thank you for being here. I enjoyed our talk yesterday. I just really have more comments than questions. I think my comment is big three: ditto, ditto, ditto. All right, I definitely agree with all the points that you made. We are definitely aligned. With this slide in particular, though, I think you're spot on with respect to the priorities and how they've shifted. Ridership was our number one. Of course, any business wants to add customers to its business, and transit should be the same. We want to add additional customers to our business, but there was a shift with the pandemic. And I think that I would just modify that slightly to say customer satisfaction / safety.
Safe, yeah,
I
that's
think
good.
both of those are conjoined, and safety is what's important now as we had this paradigm shift in transit and this disruption in transit. It was about safety. It was about communicating to the customers that transit is safe to ride if you absolutely need to use it during these times. Because it's the first time in my 30-year career, I've actually been in the unenviable position of telling folks, don't ride transit. Because the advice was right initially, right? This pandemic is the recommendation from CDC and all authorities was not to gather. And transit is a system that you gather. It's a multi-ride system. It's a shared ride system. And so you gather to use it. And that's what makes it efficient. That's what makes it effective. And so that was the right advice. Now, with the light at the end of the tunnel, the mobilization of inoculations, throughout the country, we're starting to see people trickle back to the system. But there's still a disruption. And I guess I'm hopeful that it won't take 5 years. And I heard you say that.
It's on commuter services.
Yeah, on commuter services.
Just commuter,
okay.
yeah, not on bus.
I'm hopefully looking at, and I know it's going to be more than a year because people are still going to be very judicious about, gathering, even with, the achievement of herd immunity. And so we, as a transit industry, we have to pivot. We have to be pliable. And I think that's the direction we're going in. Public transit and mobility is about an array of options. It's not about just fixed route. It's not about just paratransit, ride hailing services, commuter rail, heavy rail, your personal vehicle. It's about giving people an array of options to meet their mobility needs. And now we see that, while fixed route, I believe, is one of the best inventions ever in terms of how that service operates. We recognize that the demand has shifted to more personalized service, especially during this pandemic. And it's actually been corroborated with what we've seen during the pandemic with our microtransit service in the Glades region, where we actually adjusted that service, which was a circulator service in the 3 cities that deviated upon request to a full on-demand service that we are now introducing technology similar to Uber and Lyft, where you can ride hail that service just similar to Uber and Lyft in the Glades community. And that's the only mode of the 3 modes that Palm Tran has that has experienced an increase in ridership. And so how do we apply that service to other communities within this very large geographical community? And so that's what our thinking is. And so our shift in terms of RPM, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend lunch to talk to you more about this, but we're going to be talking more about this, Mr. Chair and Nick, and that is RPM 2.0, which is actually 3-pronged. And the first prong is first last mile, similar to what PSTA is doing in Pinellas, where they've leveraged Uber, Lyft, and other ride-hail services to fill that important gap, that first last mile gap in the service, especially here in Palm Beach County, where most of our residential areas are guard gated. And if we can get folks from the footprint of their doorstep to our system or to Tri-Rail, we have succeeded. And so that's a priority that we want to actually implement this year. The second prong is looking at other communities similar to what we've implemented in Go Glades. And by the way, we kind of fell upon that with the pandemic, because we made that shift with the pandemic to go full on demand. And so we're looking at applying that in other communities throughout Palm Beach County. We have 39 municipalities. Where else could that work? And then third, and very importantly, but a little bit more long-term, is working very closely with the TPA and Nick and company on the 561 plan in that long-term vision to implement premium transit. And so those are the 3-pronged approach that we are looking at for the RPM 2.0. One is very immediate, one is midterm, and one is somewhat long-term. So I just want to thank you. I tell you, I've always said that crisis breeds innovation because, we have found in the transit industry, and I think Paul has shared a lot of the innovations that has been happening in transit with technology and how we address things as a result of this pandemic. One of the things that, has been around for a while that's kind of been reinvented by the pandemic that we are now going to latch hold to and implement are QR codes. So you go to a restaurant, they don't pass out the menu anymore. They say, hit your QR code on the table right there. And people are very adept at using them now. And they've always been around, but people haven't used them as much. And so we are going to put QR codes on every bus stop. And that QR code will bring up our entire system. That QR code will give you real-time information on when the next bus and how many people are on the next bus. And so, using, a lot of what's happening now to, make our system better is the somewhat silver lining, in this crisis. So, Paul, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to future conversation. I want my book.
Thank you, Clinton. So we're just on time. We do have one more question, I think, from one of our board members, right, on the line?
Yes, so we have one more question. It's by Councilwoman Chelsea Reed. Chelsea, I'm going to allow you to talk. You should unmute on your end. Okay.
Got it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Comfort. I'm enjoying your book. I've been reading it the last few days. I just have a quick question. I want to know what your thoughts are on the $205 billion bill that's now being introduced at the House, the American High-Speed Rail Act. I want to know what your thoughts on that, and then also what can we, as a TPA board and MPOs do to prepare if it goes through. Thank you.
Okay, I heard the first part, which was what do I think of the $205 billion Rail Act introduced in Congress? I haven't read it, but I think it's what I talked about earlier is that the federal response to this pandemic has been that people are realizing there needs to be an investment in public transit. One of the observations I've made down through history, I'm a history major, is that there's really been no great public works projects in any nation unless it was funded by the national government, whether it was the investment in Paris during Napoleon's time. They always say make the trains run on time. The national government had to be involved in things like that, even if it was in just their cities, or the septic systems, the sewer systems in some of these cities, or the pyramids of Egypt. All these great public works projects that have come down through the ages have always had federal government involvement because it only makes sense. Local governments, little cities and towns could not pay for these massive infrastructure projects. And we are one country, and we really are connected by what? By our highways, our rail, and our air infrastructure. And so the investment in safety and improvement in those is what this new $3 trillion potential investment in infrastructure that's being talked about in Washington, D.C. is about. And so any investment in rail or bus infrastructure, I think, is something that we really need to look at positively and analyze to see, we have to make sure we can afford things, right? That's the fiscal reality side of things that elected officials have to look at. But I believe also that the reason I'm calling it an investment is that it's not just money spent like blowing money on a cruise in the Gulf of Mexico where you do it for a week and then it's gone. And that money is sunk money down the drain. An investment in rail and bus infrastructure will be there for decades to come. And it will have returns on the investment by improving the economic efficacy of what's happening in our economy. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks, Paul. I think the second part of the question, and we'll wrap it up with that, was what considerations can NPOs or the TPA do now to prepare?
Yeah, well, it sounds like, MPOs, they're, what's the middle name? Planning. And so metropolitan planning organizations need to start planning for the infrastructure, and it takes a long time. I can tell you that when I was at MTA, we were building what's called the Purple Line, which was a light rail line, 16.2 mile light rail line in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. and Maryland. And that thing was planned for 10, 20 years. And then finally, we had a Governor Hogan, who put the money behind it to make it happen. And it was putting together federal money, state money, private money, all in a big package, which was very complicated. And then we awarded it to a concessionaire who would design, build, operate, and maintain the service, which we haven't even had a chance to talk about public-private partnerships. But that's a key way that big infrastructure projects are being funded around the globe now. And so metropolitan planning organizations really are the point of the spear on getting those things done, because they're the ones that are pulling together. Here you've got dozens of towns and cities all pulling together. And so you need a central planning organization to pull together, and understand 5 of your county commissioners are on your board. So that's wonderful, as you can pull together the decision makers to start thinking long-term. What are we seeing, not just in the next year or two, but the next 5, 10, or even 20 years down the line? Because that's the kind of planning it takes when you're going to put in rail. It takes a 10-year at least vision to make that happen. And you have to have people with a political will right up front to get it on the books. You may not put it in your capital budget quite yet for the construction money, right? Because most of our, consolidated capital plans maybe go out 5 or 6 years, but you can start the planning aspects of it and start getting it ready. It won't be shovel ready yet, but it'll be plan ready, so that when the federal monies come, you can take advantage of them, and you can put your hand up first and say, we've already got a plan in place. Give us some of that money. That's the role of an MPO, so that you can be, there's no such thing as luck, right? Luck is being prepared when opportunity strikes. And that's what MPOs are great at. thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Hopefully I can do it again sometime. Awesome to be with everybody. Thank you, Valerie, for helping set all this up. And good luck as you continue to press forward, Mayor Pinto, and your whole group here.
Listen, enjoy the rest of your time down here in South Florida. We hope to see you again in not too distant future, sir. Thank you so much.
I love it. Thank you.